Crepuscule by Ken Themba. The morning township train cruised into Park Station, Johannesburg, and came to a halt in the dark vaults of the subterranean platforms. Already, the young of limb and the lithe and lissom had leapt off and dashed for the gate that would let them out. But the rest of us had to wade ponderously in our hundreds along the thickening platforms that gathered the populations disgorged by Naledi, Mteni, Dube, Orlando, Pimville, Mansfield, Kliptown, Springs, Benoni, and Germiston, great moors that spewed their workmanship over Johannesburg. I was in the press that trudged in the crowd on the platform. Slowly, good-humoredly we were forced, like the substance of a toothpaste tube, through the little corridor and up the escalator that hoisted us through the outlet into the little space of breath in the teeth of past demanding South African police. But it was with a lilt in my step that I crossed the parquet foyer floor and slipped through the police net, because I knew which cop to pass by, the one who drank with me at Sus Julius Shebeen on an afternoon off. It was with a lilt because it was spring as I walked out of Park Station into a pontilist morning with the sun slanting from somewhere over George Koch. And in spring, the young ladies wear colorful frocks, glaring against the sun and flaring in the mischievous breezes. I joyed as I passed into Hook Street, seeing the white girls coming up King George Street, the sunlight striking through their dresses, articulating the silhouettes beneath to show me leg and form, things black men are supposed to know nothing of, and which the law assignedly decrees may not even be imagined. Funny thing is, the law in all its horrificency prohibits me, and yet in the streets of Johannesburg I feast for free every morning, and God, if I try hard enough, I may know for real in Hillbrow every night. There is a law that says, I'm quite afraid that it will sound like I'm saying there is a law that is, well, it says, I cannot make love to a white woman. It is a law, but stronger still, there is a custom, a tradition it is called here, that shudders at the sheerest notion that any white man could contemplate or any black man dare a love affair across the color line. They do. White men do meet and fall in love with black women. Black men do explore ivory towers. But all this is severely against the law. There are also African nationalists who profess horror at the thought that any self-respecting black man could desire any white woman. They say that no African could ever debase himself as to love a white woman. This is highly cultivated and pious lying in the teeth of daily slavering in town and in cinema. African girls who are torturing themselves all the time to gain a whiter complexion, straighter their hair, and have corset-contained posteriors surely know what their men secretly admire. As for myself, I do not necessarily want to bed a white woman. I merely insist on my right to want her. Once, I took a white girl to Sophiatown. She was a girl who liked to go with me and did not have the rumored South African inhibitions. She did not even want the anthropological knowledge of how the other South Africans live. She just wanted to be with me. She had a car, an ancient Morris. On the way to Sophiatown of those days, you drove along Bree Street, past the Fordsburg police station in the Indian area, past Bramfontein railway station, under a bridge away and past the cemetery, past Bridgetown Memorial Hospital, known strangely for bringing illegitimate non-European children into the world, up Hurst Hill, past Talita Home, her place of detention for delinquent non-European girls, past aggressive Westine, saw at the proximity of so many non-white townships around her, and straight into Sophiatown. So that night, a black man and a white woman went to Sophiatown. I first took Janet to my auntie's place in Victoria Road, just opposite the bus terminus. It was a sight to glad a cynic's heart to see my aunt shiver before Janet. Mama, in my world, all women, equivalents of my mother, are mother to me. Mama, this is my girl. Where is Tata? This question, not because my uncle might or might not approve, but because I knew he was terribly fond of brandy and I was about to organize a little party, he would not forgive me for leaving him out. But he was not there. He had gone to some meeting of Amahosa, church stewards, of whom he was the chief. Mama, how about a duke for Janet? The duke. God save our gracious duke. A duke is a colorful piece of cloth that the African woman wears as headgear. It is tied stylistically into various shapes from Accra to Cape Town. I do not know the history of this innocuous piece of cloth. In Afrikaans, the language of those of our white masters who are of Dutch and Huguenot descent, doek meant variously a tablecloth, a dirty rag, or a symbol of the slave. Perhaps it was later used by African women in contact with European ideas of beauty, who realized that they had no hair and subconsciously hid their heads under the doek. Whatever else, the doek had come to designate the African woman, so that evening, when I asked Mama, how about a doek for Janet? I was proposing to transform her, despite her color and her deep blue eyes, into an African girl for the while. Ma dug into her chest and produced a multicolored chiffon doek. We stood before the wardrobe mirror while my sisters helped to tie Janet's doek in the current township style. To my sisters that night, I was obviously a hell of a guy. Then I took Janet to a shebeen in Gibson Street. I was well known in that particular shebeen. I could get my liquor on a tick and could get VIP treatment, even without the asset of Janet. With Janet, I was a sensation. Shebeens are noisy drinking places, and as we approached the shebeen, we could hear the blast of loud-mouthed conversation. But when we entered, a haunted hush fell upon the house. The shebeen queen rushed 2 men off their chairs to make places for us, and said, "What would you have, Mr. Themba?" You see, there are certain names that do not go with Mr. I do not have a clue why, but for sure you cannot imagine Mr. Charlie Chaplin or a Mr. William Shakespeare or even a Mr. Jesus Christ. My name, Ken Themba, operates in that sort of class. So you can see the kind of sensation we caused when the shebeen queen addressed me as Mr. Themba. I said, casually as you would like, "A half a jack for a start. And I suppose you would like a beer too, my dear," I said to Janet. The other patrons of the shebeen were coming up for air, one by one, and I could see that they were wondering about Janet. Some thought that she was colored, a South African mulatto. One said she was white, appending that these journalist boys get the best girls. But it was clear that the duke flummoxed them. Even iron-colored girls, whose stubborn physical appearances veer strongly to the Negroid parent, are proud enough of whatever hair they have to expose it. But this girl wore a duke. Then Janet spoke to me in that tinkling English voice of hers, and I spoke to her easily, without inhibition, without madamizing her. One chap who could not contain himself any longer rose to shake my hand, and he said in the argot of the townships, Braken! Aha, you've eaten caustic soda, my man. Look, man, get me the fish meat that looks like this, and I will buy you a vroom. That sort of thawed the house, and everybody broke into raucous laughter. Later, I collected a bottle of brandy and some ginger ale, and took Janet to my room in Gold Street. There were a few friends and their girls. Kaferki, little Kafir. He was quite defiantly proud of his name. And Hilda, Jazz Boy and Pule, Jimmy, Rockefeller, and a colored girl we called Madame Defarge, because day and night she always had clicking knitting needles with her. We drank, joked, conversed, sang, and horseplayed. It was a night of the Sophiatown of my time, before the government destroyed it. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on it being received for good or for evil, in the superlative degree of comparison only. Sometimes I think, for his sense of contrast and his sharp awareness of the pungent flavors of life, only Charles Dickens or perhaps Victor Hugo could have understood Sophiatown. The government has razed Sophiatown to the ground, rebuilt it and resettled it with whites, and with proper cheek they have called it triumph.